Fighting Blindness Canada's Young Leaders program is a career-oriented initiative that provides young people living with vision loss in Canada with the tools they need to develop their skills and pursue rewarding careers. The session you're about to watch is a recording. To learn more about the Young Leaders program, please visit the link in the video description below. The Young Leaders program is proudly supported by RBC Future Launch, Rhythm Pharmaceuticals, and the J.P. Bickell Foundation. We hope that you enjoy the session and share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Thank you for watching.
Stephanie, thank you very much for joining us today. I don't think you know I have a chat, so this is actually good. I'm going to be asking the questions, and I don't know any of the answers to these, so it's perfect. Normally we'd introduce someone, but I think this is structured a little differently, so we'll jump right into it. So do you want to give yourself a little bit of an introduction? Tell us who you are, what you do, and give us a little bit of a bio.
Sure. So my name is Stephanie Pieri, and I'm originally from Toronto, as I mentioned earlier, but I live in Ottawa now. I am a mediator for the Federal Public Sector Labor Relations and Employment Board, which is a federal tribunal that deals with primarily with grievances and complaints filed by federal public servants across Canada, and also is responsible for the collective bargaining process for federal public servants. I've been a mediator for the last 6 years, and prior to that, I worked in the field of labor relations for various government departments. And before that, I actually worked in sales in Toronto for about 10 years. So that's sort of how I fill my days these days, is trying to mediate disputes and find resolution where possible.
Nice. So that's awesome. Like what does a typical day look like for a mediator? Like can you tell us a little bit of detail about that?
Yeah, it's a fairly dynamic workplace in that we have a large number of grievances and complaints that come into our board every year. In fact, we get about 2,000 to 2,500 grievances or complaints. And we currently have a backlog of about 6,000 grievances and complaints. But we also get a lot of issues that are very timely that can have major impacts on the entire federal public service that we have to provide interventions on really as soon as possible. So that was certainly evident during collective bargaining, in that we had you may know that about 120,000 public servants went on strike earlier this year. And so my team was heavily involved in trying to mediate a resolution to that strike, which ultimately did happen, which was great, and also led to the signing of new collective agreements. And so, yeah, it's a combination of sort of individual grievance and complaints that do come in, but then also to issues that affect the entire public service.
Okay. Are you usually face-to-face with your clients or with people who are filing those, or is it more kind of...
So prior to the pandemic, actually, much of our work was done face-to-face, and I traveled quite extensively across Canada for the work that I did. Since the pandemic, we've really adopted video conferencing, and so now I'd say the bulk of my work is over video conferencing, but if a face-to-face meeting is required, I certainly will accommodate that.
Okay, perfect. Do you mind describing your vision a little bit, like what kind of challenges you have encountered throughout your education, throughout like your career and whatnot, and what kind of strategies did you employ and kind of figure out along the way to go through those?
Absolutely. So when I was 10, I was diagnosed with some form of macular dystrophy. So at the time, the scrambled egg yolk-like appearance on the back of my eye didn't have a name. And genetic testing wasn't fully developed at the time. And so the doctors at Sick Kids felt that it was some kind of macular dystrophy, very likely Stargardt's disease. And so for the first 8 years, from 10 to 18, I had this sort of working diagnosis of Stargardt's. And then when I turned 18, there was more genetic testing that was available, and the doctors felt that they didn't think I had Stargardt's anymore, but it definitely something else in the macular dystrophy type family of diseases. But at the same time, I developed a very aggressive, rare form of glaucoma on top of the pre-existing eye condition. And this was all happening literally the month before I was about to leave Toronto to start university in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So it was a very stressful period of time. Thankfully, when I got to Nova Scotia, I was able to connect with some good doctors there. And I actually traveled back to Toronto quite often to see the specialists at Sick Kids. And I was able to complete my degree, my first degree in international development studies. But I had to make a choice when I finished my undergraduate degree, because I had really hoped at that point to be able to go and do development work in third world countries, go to, countries in Africa or South America and develop in developing countries and provide aid. And I actually had really hoped to be working for Oxfam. But because my glaucoma was so aggressive at the time, and I actually had 5 different surgeries in a very short period of time, it wasn't practical for me to leave the country, and certainly not to go to a third world country where there was questionable medical help available. So I had to pivot. And so what I ended up doing was going back and taking a couple of courses in what's called public administration, or sort of the study of government. And I enjoyed the courses so much that I ended up doing a second degree. And so I did a degree at then called Ryerson, now Toronto Metropolitan University. I decided that I wanted to steer my career towards working in government. And so I left Toronto and came to Ottawa, and was able to secure a job in the federal government. And at the same time, I started doing my master's. And at around that time, the genetic testing had actually advanced quite a lot for the testing of various eye diseases. And so I went through a second round of genetic testing, and this time they were able to confirm that I had something called autosomal recessive Best disease, which is a rare form of macular dystrophy. It affects the central vision. It appears like sort of scrambled egg yolks at the back of the vision, the back of the eye, sorry. But it is a blinding eye disease. It's a slow progressing blinding eye disease. And as I mentioned, it affects your central vision and everything that comes with that. So your ability to read, your ability to recognize people's faces, your color definition, and so on. And so with that diagnosis, I again had to make a decision about my career, because at the time I was doing, I just started working in labor relations, but I was doing a lot of work with paper files, and I was really struggling at the time. And all I can say is that it's amazing how much technology has advanced really over the last 10 to 15 years. But I knew I needed to gear my career into a direction where I wasn't heavily I wasn't reading paper copies of documents primarily, because I knew that was something that I just couldn't sustain over hours of the day, even with some of the technical aids. And so I started to take some courses in mediation, and eventually decided to become a mediator, which I was successful doing in 2017. And I really found that to be beneficial because it's a job where I actually have to talk quite a lot, and
Right.
I don't have to read
Right.
as much. I really have to focus more on what people are telling me,
Hmm.
and working with them to try to get resolution. So it allows me to use a different set of skills than what I was previously doing, which was more research. And so that's sort of how my vision has kind of impacted my career, and in that sort of, as I had challenges come up in my vision, I was able to sort of redirect my career all along the way.
Interesting. Interesting. It's interesting you bring that up. Like mediation is good for somebody with vision loss because you don't read so much. It's a lot of listening and talking. Like sometimes I sit there and when I'm thinking, sometimes I kind of just brainstorm like jobs that people like us can do
Yep.
very, very well. And mediation was never one that I thought of. But now that I think about it, like that really is what it is. You listen to people's opinions and their thought processes, and then you kind of help them come into an agreement with another party, essentially, right?
Yeah, and I
Like,
faced a little bit of challenge, I think, with some of the sort of more, let's call them seasoned mediators when
but
I
yeah,
first started, because one of them was, I certainly remember a conversation I had with one mediator who was somewhat critical of me being able to do the job, because she said that you're going to need to read people's faces, and if you can't read facial expressions that well because that part of your vision is blurred, how are you going to be able to do your job? And it's amazing how I am still able to read cues that people give in
hmm,
mediation and in negotiations outside of just their facial expressions. Because sometimes just the way that somebody shifts in their chair or leans forward,
right,
or maybe exhales, or they do things that can also let you know that maybe they're experiencing a feeling with respect to something that they've heard. And
yeah,
it's a great opportunity for you to ask a question and prompt them, and get them to verbalize what the concern is.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. A lot of people take tone for granted too. Like, not everyone can understand the atmosphere of a room through tone, but I think some people do it better than others, and I'm guessing you probably would be one of those people. So it's
Absolutely. And
interesting.
it's funny because my son is on the autism spectrum, and he has a challenge with tone sometimes. But there's nothing wrong with his vision. It's just that
Yeah,
he's not able to read tone, and so it goes to show you that your vision isn't necessarily the only thing that can limit you sometimes, and that sometimes you just have to be open to other ways of sort of reading a situation, and understanding it, and being able to deal with it.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right. Well, I have a little bit some more detailed questions, I guess, that are going to kind of piggyback on what you told me before. Um, so you mentioned that before the pandemic, you did kind of you were face to face. Like, did you travel at all? Like, even in school, when you were in school, like, how do you cope with that?
Travel's been challenging at times, I'm not going to lie. I love to travel. It's something that, again, pre-pandemic, I did quite often, both for work and personally. Um, and um, I've had to pick up a few tricks along the way in order to feel more comfortable in an airport setting, especially.
Right.
Um, and I think, first of all, it's my number one trick is get there early. I think that's a mistake
Yeah.
that a lot of my husband, who likes to sort of arrive when the plane is just pulling off down the runway. We're at the point where we almost travel separately to the airport just to avoid a marital dispute. But no, I find it's really important to get to the airport early, and because I do not want to be rushed. I really need the time in order to feel comfortable using my assistive devices to be able to, secure myself within the airport environment and know where I'm going, especially if it's an airport I've never been to before.
Right.
When I was traveling for work, I've been to every city in Canada. And um, the airports are very different. I mean, if I was in Charlottetown or St. John, Newfoundland, or St. John's, Newfoundland or something, I mean, the airports are tiny. So you really can't get lost because, you know, there's only 2 or 3 counters to check into and, you know, one airport security line. And then everybody sits in the same area waiting for the plane. But then when you're at Pearson Airport, or Vancouver Airport, some of these larger ones, it is challenging. And so you really need to have some extra time to make sure you're not rushed.
Right.
Flights. The other device that I don't leave home without is my monocular lens. Like that has made a huge difference for me in terms of my level of comfort at airports, because it just allows me to be able to read the departure boards, know which gate I'm going to. I can get to my gate early. I can feel very comfortable. And I love my monocular lens. I was using my phone and taking pictures. And I ended up with the strangest photo gallery on my phone possible. All these departure boards. And, you know, I'm sure I was attracting the attention of security as well, wondering why is this person taking pictures of this? But no, the monocular lens is really good. I really enjoy it. And also too, while I don't use it, like I don't rely on a cane day to day in terms of getting around. Certainly when it's daylight out, at night it's a different story. Just having the cane physically with me lets people know to sort of give me a little bit of space, give me some time, and give me some extra help if I need it, without having to explain anything.
Do you have a little bit of light sensitivity as well?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
So when I handle, if it's very bright outside, it's almost like being in the pitch black in that I can't see, but I'm also night blind, which makes it really challenging too. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay. Disclosure, everyone's favorite question. So you've held a few jobs. And I guess with every single time you transition from one place to another, there's that disclosure again, right? How do you go about that? What's your strategy and what's the response been like?
Disclosure, it's probably one of the most challenging things I've had to go through. I am myself a very private person. I don't love people knowing my personal situation. That said, I do require certain accommodations within the workplace in order to be able to do my job. The other element is the accommodations that I require usually also require the assistance of the IT group or we call them the accommodations group within my workplace, but somebody else other than my manager needs to know in order to help with the implementation of the accommodations.
Right.
So personally, I've had to sort of be able to advocate for myself in a way that I feel comfortable. But at the same time, it hasn't come easy because I have had some people, I think a lot of people honestly try to come from a good place. I really do fundamentally think that. I think 98% of people are coming from a good place. There is the odd person, though, that I've had in my career that has felt uncomfortable in this situation, and in their discomfort has sort of cracked inappropriate jokes or felt that they need to relate to me in a way that's not necessarily, I would consider to be appropriate. So, one of the biggest challenges I had was in 2012, I lost my driver's license because of my vision. I didn't pass the vision test anymore, so I had to give up my license.
Right.
And that was emotionally a very challenging thing to deal with. But at the same time, I was also having to go through more accommodations at work and start to look at things like CCTV devices and stuff like that. So it was becoming more evident that there were vision issues.
Right.
And I had someone come up to me and, say to me, I totally understand what you're going through. When I was 40, I needed to get reading glasses. you know, and you're
Yeah,
like,
it's not the
yes,
same
that's
thing.
exactly my situation. Totally. Thank you. I really feel like we've connected now. So it's not that it's, you know, I can sort of laugh about it now. I didn't laugh about it then, but I think you have to recognize that there are some people that are coming from good places, but they themselves don't know how to handle these situations. And
Right.
so your ability to give them a little bit of grace will go a long way, I think.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess here's a question that kind of goes hand in hand. So there's two questions. You answered the first one on disclosure. You kind of touched on the accommodations, you know, assistive technology that you use. You mentioned the monocular. Let's say you're going into like a meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know how much technology do you use? Like, do you tell people around you what the situation is?
Yeah. So
Is it visible, I mean, or is it like
no,
how does that
so
work?
yeah, within the workplace itself, like, you know, once I'm sort of in work mode,
Right.
you know, I do have I wear glasses for the computer, just it does help, but distance glasses, you know, it doesn't make a difference anymore. I'm at the 2200 mark. I can't get any improvement.
Right.
And for reading, I have a very strong pair of reading glasses, but even then, it's if it's electronic, I'm okay, but if it's paper, I can't read it.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I've had to, you know, I mean, I work in a very small organization. I'm very lucky. There's only about 65 people I work with. And they do, for the most part, know. That said, it's quite common that, you know, someone will pass me a piece of paper that's an Excel spreadsheet or something, and I can't read it. So
Yeah.
I sort of
Yeah.
smile and kind of put it down, and I just
Mhm.
listen to what they're saying.
Right.
And generally speaking, they get the message that they've sort of made a mistake. Now, there has been new legislation that's passed within the federal government context that employers are required to make all documents internally accessible. Departments within the federal government are still working on that. I can tell you it is a work in progress, but I can say that it is getting much better with respect to document accessibility. And in fact, you know, we're just moving away from paper in general, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
So, but you know, we have large screen monitors within our meeting rooms, and some people might again put the same Excel spreadsheet up on that screen. I still can't see it.
Yeah.
But I get people that I ask them to sort of describe to me what's happening or what they want me to comment on.
Right.
And then and then usually we're able to work it out.
That's fair. Okay. Um, yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Uh, have you ever dealt with any labor disputes, like with people with disabilities, for example?
Yeah,
Like
it's hard because
anything like that? Like, is there any like you mentioned like the federal like mandate of them trying to make it like internal documents accessible, but
yeah. So
what's what's
I think we're
what's
on the
with that?
cusp of getting the complaints in, to be honest. There have been complaints in the past. They've been dealt with through the Canadian Human Rights Commission mostly.
Okay.
But with the passage of the what's called the Accessibility Act, I think we're on the cusp of probably seeing some complaints coming in.
Okay.
But I have definitely dealt with grievances and complaints in the past with people that felt like they were not accommodated in the workplace.
Right.
Um, and absolutely, you're within your right to file a grievance if you work in a unionized environment, or a complaint under the Canadian Human Rights Commission if that's the legislation that governs your workplace, or the Ontario Human Rights Commission if that's, you know, the jurisdiction you work under.
Right.
What I can tell you is they're very long and prolonged processes. and I wouldn't wait for the completion of those processes ever. Like, I would never wait for them in order to think that the resolution of that complaint or grievance is going to resolve your issue. I would strongly recommend that anyone that's in a situation where they feel they need to file a grievance or a complaint is to still try to work with the other party to try to get the accommodation that they need. Because the grievance and complaint process, both federally and provincially, is just so backlogged. It takes years and years and years for things to get resolved. And much of the time, what I've seen in my career where a grievance or complaint has been filed because someone feels they have not been accommodated, it's usually, I'm not going to say it's always, but it's usually the case that the other side just doesn't know how to do it, as opposed to them saying, no, I'm not doing it. And that's a big distinction. So if it's how, then, you know, that just means getting the information in order to show somebody how to do it. If it's no, that's a different discussion, but rarely have I heard it be no.
Right.
Rarely, most of the time it's they don't know how. And thankfully there's a lot more resources out there now that are helping to facilitate the accommodation process for anybody within the workplace. There's a number of organizations that, even if you work for a small company, you work for Joe's Roofing, and, you know, Joe doesn't know how to accommodate you. Joe can reach out to different organizations that are available to provide that information. It's not like it was, you know, again, I don't want to age myself, but you know, it's come a long way. Let's put it that way. It's come a long way. Yeah. And it's the same thing with universities and colleges as well. I mean, when I started out doing my first undergrad, you know, they had dealt with people with vision loss in the university system for years, but there wasn't just really the tools available other than having somebody else take your notes for you. So that wasn't available. Like, there wasn't much else that they could offer you. But now there's the ability to record sessions. There's voice to text technology. There's the professors, you know, are more willing to provide their notes. I mean, there's just, it's endless what's available now. Just knowing what to ask for.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with that. Like, since I was in elementary school to now, I think it could have been much easier if the technology that we had today was available back then. Like, we've come a long way, leave it at that. So it's changed quite a bit. We're kind of reaching the end of our little question and answer session here. I got one last question for you, and then I'll open it up to our participants to answer some questions. So if you guys have anything, you can start thinking about them now. Just to close us off here, Stephanie, if there was one thing you've kind of learned along the way, and you'd go back and tell yourself, what would that be?
I think the lesson that I learned the most over the years, for me, because the eye disease that I have is a slow progressing degenerative eye disease, my needs have changed. They changed when I was 20, they changed when I was 30, they changed when I turned 40. Like, they've constantly changed. And when I've been in the workplace, you know, I've thankfully had managers that have said, yes, you know, we'll help you. We'll have we'll help you in terms of what accommodations you need. What do you need? And I felt that I've had to answer that question myself. And I didn't know what I needed. Because I did, look, I'm not a technology expert. I didn't know what brand of CCTV device was better than the other one, or, you know, what kind of lighting I needed in my office in order to help with my vision. And I think the thing was is that, the lesson that I learned in the long run was that is to ask for help. There's a lot of resources out there that are available. And this is all part of the advocating process, is just recognizing, look, yourself the best, but you also can rely on other people to help you get what you need in order to do your job. And so just to shift the onus off yourself and give yourself, again, some grace, and make sure that you're using all those resources to the best of your ability to help you get what you ultimately need.
Yeah, absolutely. I can kind of relate to that, to be honest with you. When I was in university, I didn't know what they could provide. And
No.
the accessibility officer, she was nice. She basically told me, like, here's what we can do. And she gave me like a list of things that were available. And I was kind of surprised. I was like, I didn't know there was that many things that you guys could do for me, but it definitely helped. So,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't know that if I never reached out for that help. So
absolutely. And yeah. I mean, we're getting a lot better, I think, just even as a community coming together and sharing experiences and talking, and I love the mentorship program that the FBC has. I had a wonderful experience with that last year, and I really wish, as I was saying to Morgan earlier, I really wish it was something that I had when I was starting out in my career, because I honestly, when I was diagnosed with Best disease, I was told I was one in 20 people in Canada that had it. And I had no community. Like, I didn't know anybody else. And it was a very lonely experience at times, for sure.
Right.
And it's only more recently, I think, through organizations like FBC, through just technology in general, and being able to connect with other organizations. Like, I'm a member of the Macular Society in England as well. And I've been able to connect with a whole bunch of people that have Best disease that happen to live in Europe. It's just that there's so much out there. And so really just keep exploring, keep interested, and take advantage of the resources that are available, because the message at the end of the day is that you're not alone. You're not the first one to go down this road.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take some questions here. I see Jeff Rainey, he posted a question. He says, what were the soft and transferable skills that drove you to a career in mediation? And then he says, and what qualities have you adopted or enhanced in your role in labor relations and grievances?
Yeah. So when it's funny that I had a very winding path towards labor relations in my career, because when I first started working, I actually worked in customer service. I developed the listening skills there, for sure, to hear people's complaints and to try to get them resolved within a timely manner. But from there, I moved into sales. And through sales, I actually developed a lot of negotiation skills.
Right.
So when I got interested in labor relations, and I was very interested in labor relations because I had some negative experiences within the workplace in my first 10 years of working. And I recognized at the end of the day that we actually spend a lot of time at work. And I'm one of those people that wants to make the work experience as positive as possible. And so, when we do have these negative experiences, I'd like to be part of the solution and trying to getting them resolved. And so that was what spurred me into getting into labor relations. But looking back at my career, it was my time doing customer service and my time in sales and actually negotiating that really helped me develop my skills as a mediator, because that's what a lot of mediation is. I mean, a really good mediator is someone who doesn't have to say very much at all, but can ask the right question at the right time to get the parties to do this work in terms of trying to get the resolution. So it's mediation is a career that, it's not regulated, and that anyone can really hang up their shingle and call themselves a mediator. But there are courses that are available that you can take, and but it really is the time. It's spending time with people that are in conflict and trying to help get a resolution. And the more time you spend, the better you get at it.
Okay, perfect. Morgan's posting here. She says, thanks for sharing your experience, Stephanie. I wonder if you could talk a bit about mentorship. I know you participated in our program as a mentor in the past. Did you have any mentors that influenced you along the way? How did it feel being a mentor for someone else?
Yeah, Morgan, it's such a great question, because it's one of those things that, in all honesty, I really wish I did have growing up. I had mentors, but in terms of mentor in my dealing with sort of my vision loss issues, I never had a mentor. I had a lot of doctors over the years. I'm actually at 46 still a patient at Sick Kids Hospital, believe it or not, because my eye disease is so rare. There's aren't doctors sort of outside of Sick Kids that can sort of monitor and treat me. Not that there's a treatment right now, but they sort of monitor the vision. But yeah, I a lot of doctors, not a lot of mentors, and to me, it's sort of something I really wish I could go back and change, because I found the mentor experience that I had to be so rewarding for myself. Last year, I was matched up with somebody through FPC that, believe it or not, actually has the same rare eye condition that I do. And he has been, yeah, I won't speak for him in terms of his experience. I hope that he found it as positive that I did. I really, really enjoyed it, because it was an opportunity for me to hopefully share some of my experiences, some of the tougher lessons that I've learned over my career, and in my life, and help him avoid some of those pitfalls that I sort of fell into or stumbled into over the years. And I really, really did enjoy it, and I certainly would encourage anybody to get involved in the mentoring program at FBC. I think it's really worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody else have any questions that we can throw out here? Got one here from Jacob. Just looking back, either personally or professionally, would you have done anything similar or different?
It's a very good question, Jacob, because I don't think I would have done much differently. I really had the opportunity to pursue each of my passions along the way. As I said, I really did want to get into international development studies. And though I didn't ultimately pursue a career in international development studies, I am very strongly involved in community development work in Ottawa, in my home community, and also in my son's school community. So, I have been able to sort of use those skills that I learned in my undergrad. Even though I didn't pursue the career, I've still found a lot of value in what I did, and certainly get a lot out of my volunteer activities. So yeah, I don't think that you should really ever let anything stand in your way of what you want to do. I just practically at the time was facing some medical issues that were preventing me from, going to sub-Saharan Africa and working, in an area that, because it could have come at a much bigger cost at the time with respect to my vision. But that didn't mean I couldn't pursue what I'd like to do in other ways.
Right.
And I think that that's the important thing to do, is I think sometimes you just have to be a little bit more creative. Yeah.
Okay. Vesper, I see you have your hand up. You want to unmute?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Perfect. I'm calling in, so this is a little bit different. I'm just wondering, I'm a political science major in university, and I'm wondering what careers within the political sector you found to be the most accessible, and then which ones you found to be the least accessible.
In all honesty, so I've been a public servant for the last 17 years. I can tell you that the public service has evolved immensely over those 17 years with respect to the whole accessibility portfolio. And I would be surprised that there'd be very few positions within the public service that somebody with vision issues couldn't encumber. I will say, like, I used to work at Canada Border Services Agency, and we did have 1 or 2 border services officers that were not able to maintain their positions as officers because of vision loss issues, but they were able to continue to do border security work just in different fields. And the reason why is because border services officers are required to be armed with firearms. And of course, if you have vision issues, that's you don't meet the vision standard in order to be able to carry a firearm. But there are a ton of opportunities that were, parallel to that allowed them to continue on and have great careers. But yeah, there are some, limitations, but it doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of opportunities. And if you enjoy political science, I think you would want to make a decision as to whether or not you are more interested in the public service type work, or if you're more interested in the politics type of it, and when wanting to maybe work on, the House of Commons or the Senate, or following more of the political side of things. But certainly I can encourage you, if you are interested in the public service, there's a ton of opportunities. And I would say you would be spoiled for choice in terms of what you could do.
I have a follow-up question to that.
Of course.
So, like you mentioned, Canada Border Service Agency, as well as, like, say, organizations such as the RCMP or the Defense Agency and whatnot, a lot of those have requirements to say join them that, say, somebody with vision loss doesn't meet. You mentioned people transferring out of positions because they lost their vision, but is there opportunities, do you think, to, say, join them when you don't meet those standards to begin with?
Yes, absolutely. There's ways to join without meeting the standards. I will say again, for the positions that have they're called bona fide operational requirements. So for a position with a BFOR, as it's called, such as a border services officer carrying a firearm, or an RCMP officer carrying a firearm, or having a driver's license, there isn't a lot of wiggle room. But if your interest is in, for example, border security, the border services officers make up only a percentage of the positions that actually work in border security. There's a whole other variety of positions that are open and available to anybody, including those with vision issues. For example, working on the intelligence side and monitoring the comings and goings of people within Canada. Or certainly another element is on the trade side too, and or if you're interested in smuggling, like there's a whole issue on smuggling with human trafficking. There's a lot of jobs within the sort of security and intelligence field that certainly somebody with a visual impairment would not have a problem doing. But the positions that do require what they call a BFOR, which is it's like a bus driver needing a driver's license. That's considered a BFOR. Then it would be challenging to obtain a position like that with a pre-existing issue, such as a vision issue, or a hearing issue is another one, that sort of thing. Does that make sense?
That's really interesting. Yeah, and I didn't know that. That's really interesting. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is like, I had a very limited experience in that, I had sort of gone and done a 4-year course hoping to go to Africa, as I said. And when I finished, I couldn't go. Could I should, maybe I change that. Could I have gone? Yes, but there would have been I would have had some pretty significant health issues because of it. Because as I said at that time, I had to have 5 eye operations within a very short period of time after graduating. And so it was a choice I made where I put my health over my interests, but it doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities out there. There are a lot of opportunities out there. And it's just sometimes thinking a little bit more creatively about it, and looking at all options.
I think you bring up a good point there, Stephanie, on thinking creatively. Like there's a lot of jobs, I think that a lot of people don't think you can do, but if you can sit there and brainstorm ways, which you'll find ways like workarounds on certain things.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure you can convince people to hire you on certain positions.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think the thing is too, is that, look, I mean, there's a couple of jobs out there that have this BFOR requirement, or this bona fide occupational requirement. You know, certain positions in the military, certain positions in security, certain positions, like, you know, there's a couple of them out there, but they are the minority. They are the minority of positions. And at the end of the day, you know, I think if it's something that you honestly feel that you're capable of doing, don't stand in your own way. I mean, as you said, and I'll give you a parallel example, totally parallel. A friend who does not have vision loss issues, but desperately wanted to be a vet. I went to university with her. She graduated university. She went back to high school after finishing university because she didn't have the math requirement in order to get into veterinary college. She did 2 years of math in high school to get her math equivalency, only to go back and reapply to find out that she wasn't qualified because she didn't have grades elsewhere. And I mean, this is something that went on for about 10 years in order for her to try to get into veterinary college. At the end of the day, she ended up signing up for a vet technician course and loved it. And, you know, I think we sometimes limit ourselves by and anyone is susceptible of doing this by sort of saying, this is by defining by being too definitive in terms of what we want to do without looking at the broader interest, and then looking at all career options that are available within that interest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I think we'll take one last question and then we'll close it off there. This is just a follow-up question from Jacob. This, how do you feel about changes that have been happening with regards to accessibility disclosure for those who have visual impairment? Are there any ways you think this could be improved?
It's a really good question, because I'm somebody that's just, I'm not, you know, I'm obviously comfortable talking to you in this environment about my vision issues, but it's not something I sort of have relished doing in my career. It has gotten, I would say within the last, I would say 3 years, that would be about the time frame, it's gotten so much better with respect to in the accommodation process. When you do have to go through disclosure, they are requiring a lot less information, in my experience, than what was required in the past. I remember not 7 or 8 years ago having to provide medical documentation from my doctor explaining what my vision was, and providing the documentation that the employer required in order to get a CCTV device. And I remember my doctor saying to me, he's like, I'm an ophthalmologist. I have no idea what kind of technology you need. I don't know why your employer wants me to tell them what kind of CCTV device you're going to need. And I mean, it was ridiculous. But I can tell you now, most recently, because I've actually had to get a new CCTV device at work, that my employer just went with what I said. And I sort of did my due diligence in terms of what I needed. And I didn't have to provide any medical documentation. I even asked them, I said, do you need a note from the doctor? They were like, nope, don't need that at all. Just tell us what you need and we'll make it happen. And so it's gotten a lot better, for sure.
That's awesome. Okay, I think we are nearing the end. Morgan, did you have anything you want to add here? I don't know if you're around or not.
I am. Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was great. And Haamid, excellent moderation as usual. No, I think that was it for me. That was really great. Appreciate you taking your time and sharing that with us. And again, just remind everyone that we have one more Career Connections on Saturday, September 16th. So I encourage you to sign up for that.